If I told you about a company that was founded in 2020, made the Inc. 5000 list, partnered with creators like Mr. Beast, had a CEO in his 20s and a team of less than 50 people, and was acquired within just a few years for a rumored $1 billion, what do you think that company sold? Some viral SaaS product, maybe a clothing brand, a supplement brand, or maybe some sort of viral consumer product? However, you would be wrong. It was pet insurance, which sounds crazy at first because pet insurance is probably one of the least sexy businesses imaginable. There's tons of regulations, it's hard to get into, and for many people it just doesn't make sense. But that is exactly what makes Spot Pet Insurance so interesting. Behind this is a story of a company that had a massively underserved market, packaged it in a way that consumers could understand, and scaled faster than anyone expected. So in this video, I'm going to break down the full Spot Pet Insurance story. How the company started, why the market was so attractive, who the founder was, how they grew so quickly, the unit economics of the business, how they marketed the product, who they competed against, why they were acquired, and most importantly, what this teaches us about building a boring business in a high leverage industry. So let's go all the way back to how this company was started. So in 2020, the CEO of the company, Trey Farrow, saw a statistic that only about 2% of pets in the United States had pet insurance, while in Europe, it was more around 35 to 40% of pets that had pet insurance. So in seeing this gap, Trey essentially wanted to offer an easy-to-use, Gen Z millennial-focused pet insurance solution that was online to the US markets and really tap into this growing industry. So in 2020, the company opens its doors to the public and they set their base in Florida. Now, when they launched the website, they got a few website visitors, but nothing significant. And it was in this moment when the CEO, Trey, realized that they need to become a marketing-first business. Now, fortunately for Trey, this was not his first job at marketing, and he had some experience in the past. So he attended Northwestern University for college, and while he was in college, he had a variety of internships during the summer at companies like Grubhub and Aon. And then after he graduated, he spent just about a year at Cameo, also doing influencer partnerships and learning more about marketing. So I think it was a lot of these key experiences early in his life that sort of helped him apply the tactics he learned at these bigger businesses into Spot Pet Insurance. And actually in an interview that I listened to with the founder, Trey, he actually cited that when he was working at Grubhub, they were working on sort of A/B testing, which is split testing different landing pages. And they realized that when they changed the checkout button from the red to green, it increased conversions by 10%. So I'd assume that all of these background experiences in Trey's life sort of led Spot to become the marketing-driven brand that it is today that really focuses on data-driven decisions. So now that we've covered the founder's background, when the company was started and why it was started, I want to talk a little bit about the product that they offer and also their business model, which I find really interesting. So Spot actually operates as an MGA, which stands for a managing general agent. So essentially what this means is that Spot acts sort of as the front-end brand that works on the marketing, the customer experience, but when it comes to actually the underwriting, the capital, and the regulatory risk that's required for an insurance product, they actually have another company that takes care of that for them on the back end. So Spot Pet Insurance, they partner with two businesses. They're called carriers in the MGA model. The names are Independence American Insurance Company and United States Fire Insurance Company. And these two businesses essentially covered the underwriting and the regulatory risk so that Spot really just didn't have to worry about that side of things. And I think this is one of the first magical pieces of Spot's business model. They were able to get started without significant capital and were able to move so much faster because they had another business in the back end take care of the heavy regulatory risks, the capital requirements, and actually handling the customer payouts and those complexities of an insurance business. One business that came to mind while I was researching this that sort of followed a similar playbook that allowed them to scale incredibly fast was Medvi. So what Medvi did, they were founded in late 2024, and what they offer is an easy-to-use online GLP-1 solution for customers who are looking to lose weight, and obviously GLP-1s have taken off a lot over the past year or two. But the smart thing about their model was that, kind of similar to what Spot did here, they had people that actually fulfilled the service for them on the back end. So they had a white label telehealth service, and they had a white label pharmacy that would send out the drugs to these customers. So all Medvi had to do was essentially connect all these things together and focus primarily on distribution, right? Getting customers, getting traffic to their website. And they did this incredibly well. They were able to scale in 2025. They had $400 million in revenue. They had 250,000 customers, a 16% net profit margin, which brought the founder around $65 million in profit in just 1 year. And keep in mind, they were founded in 2024, which is late 2024. Again, and the way they were able to do that was because they were lean. It didn't take much, startup capital, and they were able to focus all of their resources on distribution, right? So they used AI to build, AI ad creatives and UGC and all this amazing stuff. And they followed a very similar path, and they were able to scale incredibly quickly as well. Now, in terms of the Spot pet insurance product itself, if I'm being completely transparent, it's nothing really that revolutionary. They weren't the first people to offer pet insurance. They weren't the first people to offer it online. But in terms of their product, what they had was, they allowed lots of customizability, kind of similar to the insurance industry today, where you customize your deductible, the percentage of claims that are covered, things like that. And that allowed them, obviously, to tailor to a wide audience, whether it's someone who could afford something that's $15 a month or $100 a month. They also had the feature where, you could file a claim online, usually just a snap of a photo or just filling out a form. Clients would get their claims paid out within roughly 48 hours. So a really easy, simple to use online service. But what they did primarily was focus, instead of on the product, it was a great product, but it wasn't anything revolutionary. But what they focused on was the marketing angle and the distribution angle, and make it seem more friendly and less scary, like a lot of these larger insurance brands, like maybe Progressive or Geico, that the younger generation might not really resonate with their marketing. All right, so now we're going to shift to the unit economics. We're going to take a moment to look at probably my favorite part of any business, which is the unit economics within it. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about some of the key levers that give the insurance business model an advantage. The first feature is recurring revenue. And for the exact same reason that many investors love software businesses, insurance companies share this feature. So when someone buys a policy for their pet, they pay every single month. And ultimately, the reason why this is so attractive from a business model standpoint is that recurring revenue, allows you to really increase the lifetime value of your customer. And the reason that's important, and we're going to break down this later in this section, is the larger your lifetime value, the more you're able to spend to acquire a customer. And that ultimately allows you to scale so much faster. Now, on the other hand, you can't talk about recurring revenue without mentioning its partner in crime, which is churn. Churn is essentially the percentage of customers that drop off or that cancel your recurring revenue subscription or plan. So, to give an example, if your business has a 2% annual churn rate, that basically means that 98% of your customers will stay with your business year over year. And another fun trick with that number is that if you do 1 divided by your churn rate, you basically get the average lifetime of your customer. So at a 2% annual churn rate, the average lifetime of your customer is going to be around 50 years. So unlike something, maybe like Spotify or your DoorDash subscription, insurance is much more sticky. It's harder to cancel. And in my research, on average, the churn rate in the pet insurance industry is anywhere between 8 to 15%, which makes sense. And then the final key lever is the low marginal delivery cost. You're not really selling some sort of physical product, so there's no need, for shipping or warehousing or anything like that. And this ultimately makes it, much easier to scale. All right, so now diving into the unit economics portion. The first thing that I want to cover is LTV to CAC, which essentially stands for the ratio of the lifetime value of a customer to the cost to acquire that customer. So why is LTV to CAC so important? It's all because it just answers one simple question. Can you acquire customers profitably? So for example, Spot spends $200 to acquire a pet owner, but that customer stays for years, spending maybe $600, $800, or $1,000 of lifetime value, then paid marketing becomes a money machine. But if customer churn increases or acquisition costs rise, then the whole system breaks. So the entire game is just making sure that the lifetime value of your customer is meaningfully higher than your cost to acquire them. For reference, a healthy LTV to CAC ratio is around 3 to 1. So that means for every $3 in lifetime value of a customer, you don't want to spend any more than $1 to acquire that customer. So now let's dive into some data which I modeled for Spot Pet Insurance specifically. All right, so what I have pulled up here in front of me is an LTV to CAC analyzer that I developed for Spot Pet Insurance. Now keep in mind that this is a model. Spot Pet Insurance is not a public company, so these are all just estimates and guesses, but really I feel like this just serves as a really nice model to illustrate the power of LTV to CAC. So on the left side, we're going to be building out the lifetime value of each customer. So I'm going to be assuming the average premium per month of a customer is going to be $40 a month. Now on their website, they do advertise it as starting around $15 per month, but I am going to put it around 40 because I think some higher paying customers will drag this average up. Also, premiums do increase year over year, so it might be $15 the first year, but as years go on, it's going to get more expensive. And also, based on a Forbes article I was reading, they were saying the average for Spot is around 40 to 45. So I'm going to put it at 40. Now, the next tab here is the commission that Spot keeps. So This goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of this video, which is the MGA business model. Because Spot actually has a carrier that does all of the insurance operations for them on the back end, they really only just keep a small percentage. The industry average for an MGA is anywhere between 15 to 30%, so I'm gonna put it around 20% for Spot. All right, so the next is gonna be the annual churn rate. I have this set at 10%, which is again within the industry average of anywhere between 8 and 15% based on my research. So basically what this means is that year over year, around 90% of their customers will stay. So this sets their base LTV per customer around $915. But one thing that I do want to mention is the power of the upsell. So Spot offers a gold and a platinum add-on, which allows customers to actually add to their insurance plan, so it will cover further things such as maybe dental or things like that. This ranges anywhere between $10 to $30 per month, so I set this at $15 on average. I set the opt-in rate for this at 25%. So that means out of every 4 people that see this offer, 1 will actually opt into it. Then we have the percent of the revenue that Spot keeps from the add-on. So I set this at 50%. To be honest, this is really hard to gauge, so I'm not too sure. But what we can see here is that the total LTV is now $1,130. So there was a 23% LTV increase from the upsell. So that really shows the power of having upsells within your business. So for example, if we drop this opt-in rate to 1%, we see that the LTV to CAC drops to 2.8, where before it was at 3.4. So that's sort of the power of the upsell. Now on the CAC side, this is really hard to gauge because Spot gets traffic from all sorts of sources, and we're going to dive into this more in the marketing section of the video. They have organic, they have referrals, they have SEO, then they have Forbes and media partners. They do creator deals. They did one with Mr. Beast. They have TV ads. They do Meta ads. They do Google ads. So it's really hard to gauge the cost. But we're going to guess that the cost per website visitor is around $5.50, and we could do the conversion rate of 1.5%. For every 100 visitors, 1.5 of them will convert into a customer essentially. So that leaves a cost to acquire a customer at $367, which leaves their LTV to CAC at 3.1. One more thing I want to illustrate here though is the conversion rate. So I was talking earlier how when the CEO was actually doing an internship at Grubhub, he saw how a simple change from a red to a green button increased conversion rates by 10%. And so for example here, if we increase the conversion rate to 1.65, a 10% increase, the LTV to CAC goes from 3.1 to 3.4. So I think this model really illustrates how small and simple changes really all contribute to the LTV to CAC. So for example, if I were the CEO of this company, this is probably what you're going to be looking at every single day. You're going to be optimizing for what your cost per click is, you're going to be optimizing for your conversion rate, you're going to be optimizing your churn, you're going to be optimizing your upsells, your opt-in rates, the commissions you keep, how much your customers pay you per month. All of these things really come together to get a healthy LTV to CAC ratio. So as you can see, based on our modeling, I would assume that Spot was at or definitely above the healthy benchmark of 3. Now we're going to jump into the next section of the video where I'm going to be talking about marketing and all of their marketing strategies in depth. So taking a top-down approach, we're going to first take a look at their website traffic, which I was able to source through SEMrush. So what I have pulled up here is all of their website traffic over the past year or so. And as we can see, they have had 18.2 million website visits. 10 million of those visits were unique visitors, and 83% of the traffic came from mobile, 16% came from a desktop. The average visit duration was 6 minutes, and the bounce rate was 58.17%. And their unique visitors are up 30% year over year, and their total visits are up 52% year over year. So just sort of as a quick disclaimer, I'm pulling this all from SEMrush, and SEMrush uses their high quality algorithms to develop estimates that are pretty close, and I do trust that this is pretty close data, but it's definitely not perfect or accurate, so we're just using it for marketing research purposes. As we can see, they're getting a really nice amount of website traffic, but one thing that really stood out to me here was their traffic channel distribution. It appears that 56% of their traffic is coming in directly. Now, that could also be the fact that SEMrush is not fully attributing all of their paid traffic, and they might be attributing some paid traffic as direct traffic. I want to just talk a little bit about this direct traffic here and also add on one of the things that actually the CEO, Trey, was mentioning in a podcast interview, which is the importance of building a marketing ecosystem. In marketing, there's this rule that a lot of marketers live by. It's the rule of 7, which essentially talks about how across 7 touch points, you get a customer to convert. Especially these days as trust is declining, it's a lot harder to just throw a direct response ad and get them to fully go through a checkout and buy your product after seeing your ad just once, right? I mean, that might have worked in 2008 to 2016 when Facebook ads were first rolling out, but that's not really how the world of marketing is today. So what Spot really focuses on, and we're going to dive into all of their marketing strategies in this section, is really a holistic marketing ecosystem. So they do TV ads, they do creator campaigns, they did things on Lyft cars, they did SEO, they do meta ads, they do creator partnerships, they partner with review sites such as Forbes, they have Trustpilot reviews that are really good, they're all over Reddit. So it's all of these things that sort of build a trust ecosystem, and I think that is attributing a lot of this direct traffic. Given this ecosystem, a lot of people are seeing the ad or maybe in an organic creative, and there's not gonna be a link to go to a page. They're gonna see, oh, Spot Pet Insurance, let me look that up. So I just thought I'd share that, and I think that's an important thing to consider in today's day and age of marketing. Now, another page here that I really like to look at is the traffic journey and some of the top sources. So what I find really interesting is how 6% of the traffic is attributed from wagwalking.com and 3.33% is attributed from bestmoney.com. So wagwalking.com is actually the CEO's current venture after he exited Spot Pet Insurance. Here they talk about pet insurance, various services. So I think they're driving a lot of traffic from here to Spot Pet Insurance. This highlights the importance of various partnerships and using various platforms to help drive you traffic, because when you're getting traffic from sites like WAG or even bestmoney.com, the traffic is probably going to be cheaper than doing a direct pay-per-click Google ad. And then bestmoney.com, that's another major source of traffic when we look at the business. So these are various ranking sites. So as we can see, if I go to bestmoney.com and I go to pet insurance providers, we see that Spot Pet is ranked at #1. I think a lot of these websites that rank services, such as Best Money or Forbes or US News, I think it's probably 80% actual rankings, and obviously the fact that Spot has a really great product helps them rank. But to be also transparent, I would not be surprised if 20% of it is also building relationships with these ranking sites, maybe paying them to get little badges like fast repayment or things like that help you rank higher. So I think Spot's done a really good job getting on these ranking sites, because at the end of the day, that's what consumers care about. Consumers care about trust, and oftentimes they're going to these sites to see which insurance products are recommended and if they are trustworthy. So in terms of the destination side, I also found this really interesting. 7.14% traffic goes to samsclub.com, and this is up 41.3,000%. Now, that's obviously because they just did that partnership this year, but again, I think this speaks to the power of partnerships, and when we dive into their ads as well, we're gonna see how much they tailor their messaging to this Sam's Club partnership and to these Sam's Club clients. It really shows the power of partnerships. They got 214,000 visits here attributed from Sam's Club, and I'm sure there's a lot more that's not even being tracked here. And then obviously in terms of geo-distribution, 97.2% of their traffic is coming from the United States. And that makes sense. They're trying to tap into the low penetration in the US markets. Right now it's around 3 to 5%, I think, pet insurance, whereas still in Europe today, it's around 30 to 40%. Now, one thing I also want to take a moment to do is not only look at Spot Pet Insurance's traffic, but what I found really interesting was when I pulled up some of their competitors. So what I'm pulling up here is ASPCA, Pumpkin, I'm going to pull up Trupanion. When I pull up some of their top competitors and we look at it over a 2-year standpoint, we can really see that, this is obviously assuming that SEMrush is reporting accurately, but we can really see that around late 2024, Spot Pet was, they were up there, but they were pretty close to, ASPCA and Trupanion. They were probably around that same level. But we can see that around late 2024, early 25, they really broke out. And since then, they've been getting probably 2 to 4 times the amount of traffic as all of their competitors. All right, so now in this part of the video, I kind of just want to go through all sorts of different marketing strategies and tactics that Spot Pet employs. I have my laptop here in front of me. The first one that I want to talk about is Google Ads and Google pay-per-click ads. So within SEMrush here, within this dashboard, they do have data on this. Again, I'm not sure how accurate it is, but it kind of gives us a good idea of what they're paying for, where they're driving traffic, how they're running their campaign. So let's take a look. So I'll do, let's do April 2026. So we see here is that, they're using around 51 different keywords. Their traffic from their pay-per-click ads were 5,100 site visits, and the average cost of that was around $30,000. So roughly a $6 cost per click on average. Now, what's really interesting is, their paid search positions and what they're ranking the best at. So obviously, Spot Pet Insurance, but I find also interesting, they're paying for things like Costco Pet Insurance, Sam's Club Pet Insurance. They're really trying to market around those partnerships, and probably even though I don't think they have a partnership with Costco, just kind of pull that user base around Sam's Club maybe. I also like this tab here, ad copies. So under ad copies, we can see, some of the various ads that they're running, and they're running a lot of ads as well around sort of an educational standpoint and around their blog pages, which help them build authority within the space, build trust. So one example of them running traffic to sort of these blog posts is here: how often do dogs need to pee? Should I walk my dog more often? So I think they're utilizing a lot of, not only SEO with these blogs, but running traffic to these blogs to build trust. Clearly they have experts in this space. They're getting really creative and doing all sorts of, really kind of cool marketing. And one more thing I also just want to illustrate was I talked about the Sam's Club partnership, and I just thought I'd show that they are obviously, running ads around their Sam's Club pet partnership. So for example, here they have a landing page, save on America's favorite pet insurance. Here they have, in the corner, the Sam's Club insurance services. You can even sign into your Sam's Club account to get price. They're obviously running traffic around that narrative as well. So the next thing I want to talk about is their meta ads, which they also run. So here I have pulled up their meta ads library. Here we can see it started running June 2nd, today's June 3rd, June 1st. They're obviously constantly, ramping out new creatives, testing new creatives. And we can see, here some of the ads that they're running. Here they have one, what they did with Keisha, which is part of their celebrity partnership strategies. If we go on the landing page for this, it's obviously optimized around that. So the landing page has Keisha on there. Obviously there's continuity across the landing pages and the ads. Also, they're doing some UGC ads here, which I'm going to talk a little bit more when I talk about their influencer partnerships. Again, they're running traffic behind the Sam's Club approach. Here they have Sam's Club members. They have this sort of nice advertisement that they're running, pretty simple. And if we go to the landing page, again, continuity across the Sam's Club messaging. One more thing I just want to talk about while we're on the topic of the meta ads and the Google ads is the importance of the landing pages. In some of the interviews I was listening to with the founder, he talks about how, the level to which they A/B test and various things that they A/B test, even simple things like when people fill out information about their dog, if on the next page they could have a photo of a dog that's similar to the dog that they have, and seeing if that increases conversions, like really getting into the nitty-gritty and using these really smart and creative tactics to really just bump up that just by a few percentage points. Because as we saw in the unit economics, a small percentage increase can really have massive ripple effects across the entire business. All right, so we've covered Google ads, meta ads. Now we're going to talk about strategic partnerships. So Spot Pet Insurance, they've done a variety of strategic partnerships, and we already talked about two of them, Sam's Club, Kesha. They've done a lot of celebrity creators, even with other brands such as Purina, which is a very major pet food brand. They've partnered with them, offering their clients, discounts for Spot Pet Insurance. So a lot of these partnerships, really help them drive traffic, allow them to diversify their acquisition channel. And also, I would assume that the cost per customer or cost per click is probably going to be cheaper, and the conversion rates are probably going to be higher from strategic partnerships rather than just direct response, pay-per-click or meta ads. So I am going to throw all their partners on screen real quick just so you can sort of get a feel of all the partners that they're with if you're interested. All right, so celebrity campaigns. So celebrity campaigns is a big component of Spot's strategy. Now, I would argue that it's probably been a much bigger part of their strategy towards the front end. As obviously right now a big marketing thing is around smaller creators, UGC, that kind of stuff. But back when they were getting started around 2020 to 2023, they did a lot of celebrity campaigns. So let's walk through a lot of them. Probably one of the most prominent examples is their Mr. Beast video, which they sponsored. So they posted this around 2.5 years ago, and today it sits at around 400 million views. So just for reference, the Super Bowl gets around 125 million viewers. In an interview that I was listening to with the CEO, he was saying that after that partnership, their site traffic tripled. So that was a massive driver for the Spot Pet Insurance brand. And I think one of the most important things that speaks to the power of personal brand and sort of these media assets like Mr. Beast videos is the fact that it's an asset. It lives on that platform forever. Just in the past 365 days, that video's gotten nearly another additional 100 million views. And that video will probably continue getting views for the next decade. They had to probably pay for that partnership just once up front, and it's going to reap them rewards on and on. I spoke in the beginning how the CEO, Trey, had experience at Cameo before he started working on Spot, and they actually implemented Cameo campaigns in the beginning. So they ran various ads with various celebrity creators with their dogs and pets, and they used Cameo's business suite to basically get all those creatives, and they ran ads behind that, and that worked really well for them. And then finally, they also, in the beginning of their business, they partnered with a famous dog trainer, Cesar Millan. He was a brand ambassador, and he had a very big TV show around dog training and all that stuff. I'm not sure if he's still on or as prominent within the brand today, but I just thought I'd mention that as another celebrity that they kind of leaned on, especially in the beginning. All right, so now I want to talk about their strategic influencer partnerships and also dive into how they're being really smart when it comes to their ads management. So another key aspect of their marketing strategy is their influencer partnerships. And what's specific to note is how they're using them. So not only do they have, a variety of creators that are prominent in the pet industry that are posting, video creatives about Spot Pet Insurance, but they're actually running ads through these influencer accounts. And the reason this is so valuable is because A, when a consumer sees this ad, it comes from the influencer's account, not the company account. So it feels much more, reputable. It feels less spammy, less like a company trying to get you. And it feels more just like a social media post. The next is they're able to leverage the data that Meta has around those influencers' viewers, so the targeting is going to be much more specific. Yeah, I'd be pretty firm to assume that by running a lot of these ad creatives from these influencer partner accounts, they're getting much lower ad costs and probably much better performance. So here's one creator which they partnered with. Another thing I thought I'd mention is within all of these posts, these are all organic posts, but Spot's media team always leaves a comment, which is smart. Just covering all your bases. If someone's in the comment section, they get exposure to the brand. If we look at the description, they're tagged. Here we have another partnership that they've done with Emily Zugay. They're within the comment section right here. Obviously, organic creative strategy is really important. And then if we go to their ads library, we can see that under these accounts, right, they're actually running ads, running traffic to these influencer creatives and influencer accounts. So I've noticed a lot of other brands are doing this. Either way, it's definitely strategic and it allows them to get in front of better audiences, probably get better ad costs, better targeting, all that stuff. So now in terms of their personal Instagram page, specifically one thing that I see is a lot of these memes that they're posting. For example, my dog hearing a chip bag crinkle from 3 rooms away, right? So it's clear that by them posting these memes, they're appealing obviously to a Gen Z millennial audience. And also it sort of puts the consumer's guard down. They realize that this brand is not some big company like Geico or Progressive or some massive business that's out to get them. They feel like it's a brand that's there to help them, a brand that they can relate with, and the content's much more, digestible. All right, so now I'm going to talk about TV and YouTube ads. So on YouTube, you can actually go to their YouTube channel, and if we look at some of their most popular videos, they have a good amount of videos that have more than 5 million views. So I'd assume that they're running these as maybe Google ads on various websites or even across YouTube. I think like here, if we play this one ad here, what we can see here is a pretty traditional ad. I wouldn't even given the fact that they have a phone number here, I wouldn't be surprised if they ran this on a TV. And I was able to confirm with my research that they have ran TV ads in the past. I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is a great resource if you want to look at what kind of ads they're running. Now, next, I want to talk about 2 really unique marketing strategies that they've used or have been rumored to use, and I feel like this is really what helps them stand out across a lot of their competitors. One is Lyft ads. In 2022, they partnered with Lyft, and what they did was they placed media ads on top of Lyft cars in New York City. And these ads played specifically around prominent dog park areas in New York City. They ran this campaign in 2022, and I'm not sure if they're still running it today, but I think it just serves as a really good case study at how creative they are with their marketing. I mean, that's pretty unique to think about. I'm going to have cars around dog parks running my ads for pet insurance. Just really unique angles like that I thought I would share. The second unique angle that I was not able to find much information on, but I was only able to find from a rumored interview, was that they actually used AI to see when people posted on like Facebook or Instagram that they got a new dog. They had an AI analyze the image that was posted, see exactly what kind of dog it was, and generate a custom message to that user saying, hey, congratulations on your new dog. We recommend specifically for this breed, this insurance, this. Just building sort of an open, genuine relationship with the user and using AI and automation to, scale that pretty infinitely. And I'm guessing they probably used social media web scraping tools to, constantly monitor new posts so they were on top of them. So I think it's those unique strategies that really help them scale. I thought I'd mention those as well. Now, another marketing channel that they use that I think is pretty key, especially when it comes to building trust, is the use of review sites. So they are obviously on, Forbes, they're on Trustpilot, they're on NerdWallet, they're on US News, all of these sites that basically rank top pet insurance. One more thing I thought I would mention is AI traffic and ChatGPT ads. So this is still something that's up and coming and pretty new. But what I did was I actually opened a incognito window, and because I have a paid ChatGPT subscription, so I did it on the free version, and I typed in best pet insurance. And what popped up at the bottom was actually an advertisement. So ChatGPT is just now rolling out advertisements. And in that advertisement, there was a Forbes banner for Forbes best ranked pet insurance. And Spot was, I believe, it was definitely on the top 5 of that list. So this is still a developing channel. There was some attribution on SEMrush as a small amount of traffic coming from AI, but I definitely think over the next year to 5 years, this is going to be a much growing channel, especially because consumers place a lot of trust into a chatbot because it's conversational rather than like a Google search. All right, so we just got through all the different marketing channels that Spot Pet Insurance uses. So in this section, I want to touch on some of Spot's biggest competitors. So as you can see here, I have a list of some of their competitors, including Trupanion, Fetch, Embrace, ASPCA, Lemonade, and Pumpkin, and also all the respective years at which they were founded. And in my research of looking at Spot Pet Insurance and all of their competitors, I was really able to dispel a common limiting belief, which many entrepreneurs have when they're starting a business, which is being afraid to get into an industry or start a company when there's competitors that have a similar product to you or who are doing something similar to you. When Spot Pet Insurance entered the market, their product was really nothing new or revolutionary. They were not the first to offer an easy-to-use online customizable pet insurance. In fact, I would argue they weren't even the first to take a jab at the millennial Gen Z market. Pumpkin followed a very similar approach, and although they got acquired as well, I'm quite confident they got acquired for a significantly lower amount than Spot. It all just comes down to distribution. It's evident from the data from SEMrush that Spot clearly outperforms Pumpkin in terms of site traffic. So a key lesson here is that although product is important, I think especially in the latter stage of a business, what matters most is operations, brand, and distribution. Becoming a master at capturing attention at scale at a competitive price and then funneling that attention into loyal customers, I think that's really what matters most, and that's what Spot did really, really well. All right, so now let's talk about the acquisitions. So in my research, I was not really able to find any key seed investors or investment rounds that Spot Pet Insurance raised. However, in a YouTube interview, the CEO mentioned a Series A round in 2021, but I was not able to find any information about that was public online. What is public, however, is a minority investment from IPH, or Independence Pet Holdings, that occurred in 2022. So I'm not sure if the Series A round is the same thing as that or if that's something different, but I just thought I'd mention that in case you're interested in that. So in terms of the acquisition, Spot Pet Insurance was acquired in 2024 by IPH. IPH acquired a majority stake in the business, and it's rumored that this deal was closed at around a $1 billion valuation. However, the exact figures are not public online. And I think what's important to look at here is the nature of the acquisition and the acquirers. Over the years, IPH has acquired a variety of key players in the industry, including some of Spot's closest competitors. What's also even more interesting is that IPH actually owns the company that provided the underwriting on the back end for all of Spot Pet Insurance's deals. In essence, it seems like IPH is slowly consolidating the US pet insurance industry. Now, if you go to the IPH website, which I have pulled up here, you'll see that it acts as a holding company. IPH is actually part of a larger conglomerate called JAB, which owns multiple other companies such as Krispy Kreme, Panera Bread. Even more notably, they own a variety of veterinary hospitals, which I find interesting, and they also are the ones who own IPH, which stands for Independence Pet Holdings. So I think the important takeaway from this acquisition is not only building a great business, but also the positioning. Spot Pet Insurance was not only a great business, it was also really, really well positioned to get acquired. The IPH holding company was formed in 2021, 3 years prior to the acquisition. And the strategic partnership with Independence American Insurance Company made Spot a very high value acquisition target for IPH because IPH owned that company. So they could essentially vertically integrate the entire process. All right, so now in this section, I'm just going to briefly talk about a few ideas that I have that I would implement if I were running the business. And to be honest, Spot Pet Insurance could already be implementing these things, but I just thought I'd mention them because I found them kind of interesting. The first thing which I talked on earlier was taking a deeper look at AI, specifically chatbots. So ChatGPT recently started rolling out their pilot program for ChatGPT ads. If I were on the Spot Pet Insurance team today, that is something that I'd be looking at, seeing how we could start optimizing around paid traffic on these search engines and just testing with it. Because oftentimes when ad platforms first come out, like TikTok ads and things like that, costs are pretty low, performance is high, and I think there could be a lot of opportunity there. Adjacent to that, I think there's also a lot of opportunity in terms of like AI SEO, being able to rank number one when someone asks a question in Claude or ChatGPT, hey, what's the best pet insurance? Just making sure that Spot Pet Insurance lands at least on the top 3 lists there. The next idea I have for Spot Pet Insurance, if I were within it, and I feel like this would be getting more involved in various Reddit channels. So I found a pretty large Reddit group called Pet Insurance Reviews with 26,000 weekly visitors, which surprised me quite a bit. And there's a lot of conversations here about people asking questions, reviewing. Right now I'm looking at it, there's Trupanion, there's Lemonade. People are having open conversations about all these different insurance providers. If you could either A, build your own Reddit channel or Facebook group that you own, that people trust and go to talk about, that you could kind of influence to skew towards your brand. I'm not really sure of the legalities of that, but I feel like that could be a really creative channel. Or what you could do is you could just have bots that monitor these Reddit channels and groups and Facebook groups and do automated comments that don't really look like a brand because they're anonymous and share stuff about spot pet insurance or answer questions about spot pet insurance instantly or send DMs to Reddit users about spot pet insurance. There's a lot of signals that occur on these Reddit channels, and I think you could definitely capitalize on that, whether that's through bots or scraping or whatever that is. And then finally, I think something that could be interesting is partnering with potentially, and I'm not sure if this is already happening or if there's any legal issues with this, but either if it's like maybe pet grooming salons or like veterinary clinics to get more recommendations through those channels. So a few ideas is obviously doing maybe some sort of affiliate program, with these businesses. But I think what would be interesting is, thinking from a standpoint is, okay, how could we get into as many pet grooming salons, for example, at scale, right? Because it might be hard to build relationships with pet grooming salons one by one because a lot of them are, individual mom and pop. But what could be interesting is a lot of them use SaaS products. So for example, one's called Mogo, which I believe 10,000 different pet groomers across the country use. So if you could somehow get implemented or integrated within the Mogo system where it'd say, okay, hey, you're a pet groomer, you're using this software to manage your business, and you have a little tab there that says, hey, offer this to your customers, offer pet insurance to your customers, and you get 20 to 50% commission or something like that. Or you keep all the premium in the first year, or just some sort of unique campaign like that, I think could do really well. I think the key with that is obviously thinking of it from a leverage standpoint of, hey, how can we get in front of the most people, in front of the most salons, in front of the most veterinary clinics in a leveraged way. And I think partnering with a SaaS product that these vet clinics or grooming salons are already using could be sort of a leveraged way in. Alrighty, so that is my holistic review of the Spot Pet Insurance, everything from the founder, the background, the story, why they started it, the unit economics, their marketing strategies, the acquisition, their competitors. We talked about some things that I recommend. So I really, really enjoyed learning about this business. I feel like there's so many really, really cool and unique businesses and great business stories that often don't make the top headlines. And I think the biggest thing, again, is the lessons that you take away from these stories. For me, the lessons I took away is the power and importance of distribution, picking a leveraged business model where you're able to be nimble and cash light and able to focus a lot of your resources on distribution, learning about the key levers such as recurring revenue, churn, reinforcing the importance of the LTV to CAC ratio and how big of a role that played in their success. It was really interesting to learn about. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, just feel free to leave a comment down below. And also, if you're involved in this industry, whether as an investor, an employee, a founder, or anything like that, I'm also happy to connect on LinkedIn and have a further conversation there. Feel free to message me. I love talking about business. And with that, I will see you hopefully in the next video because I plan to make a lot more of these.